The crisp, conditioned air of the first-class lounge at JFK was a fortress against the chaos of the world, and inside, Lucy Gabriel was queen. The click of her Louis Vuitton heels on the polished granite was a rhythm of impatience, a metronome counting down the seconds until she could board her flight to San Francisco. She was on the verge of the biggest promotion of her career, ready to impress the mysterious new CEO of Innovate Corp. All that stood in her way was this flight. But as the boarding call echoed, her perfectly ordered world collided with a quiet, elderly black man fumbling with his ticket. In a flash of fury and entitlement, she unleashed a tirade so venomous it silenced the entire gate. She had just publicly humiliated a man she deemed beneath her. What she didn't know was that she wasn't just flying to meet her new boss. She was flying to meet his daughter. Lucy Gabrielle lived her life by a simple, unassailable creed: order. Her home in the Connecticut suburbs was a minimalist masterpiece of gray and white. Her schedule was color-coded and synchronized across 3 devices. Her career as a senior vice president of marketing at Innovate Corp, a titan of the tech industry, was a testament to her ruthless efficiency. At 47, she was impeccably preserved, her blonde hair styled in a severe but chic bob, her designer suits tailored to project an aura of untouchable authority. Today, however, the universe was conspiring against her sense of order. Flight 237 to SFO was delayed by 45 minutes, a minor but infuriating disruption. This trip was everything. The founder of Innovate Corp, the legendary Michael Sterling, had finally retired, and the board had appointed a new CEO from outside the company, a move that had sent shockwaves through the executive ranks. The new leader, a woman named Aria Thorne, was an enigma. All anyone knew was that she was young, brilliant, and had a reputation for shaking things up. Lucy's entire strategy for climbing to the C-suite depended on making a flawless first impression at the headquarters meeting tomorrow. When the boarding call for first-class passengers finally came, Lucy snapped her laptop shut and strode toward the gate, her carry-on gliding silently behind her. She moved with the entitled grace of a person who had never waited in a real line. But the queue at the scanner was being held up. The cause of the delay was an elderly black man. He was perhaps in his late 60s, with a kind, wrinkled face and a neat, salt-and-pepper beard. He was dressed in a simple but tasteful tweed jacket and held a worn leather-bound book in one hand. With the other, he was struggling to scan the barcode on his phone. It kept flickering out. "Sir, if you could just increase the brightness," the gate agent said, her voice tight with practiced patience. "Oh, my apologies, dear," the man said, his voice a soft, gentle baritone. "These newfangled things. My daughter set it all up for me." He smiled apologetically at the people behind him. Lucy's patience, already worn thin, evaporated. "For God's sake," she muttered, loud enough for the man to hear. "Some people are on a schedule. If you can't figure out how to use a simple phone, perhaps you should be flying cargo." The man's smile faltered. He turned, his eyes holding a quiet dignity. "I do apologize for the delay, ma'am. I'm just not as quick with these things as I used to be." His politeness only fueled Lucy's rage. It was the rage of a person who saw any obstacle to her own progress as a personal affront. It's not about being quick, it's about being considerate. You're holding up dozens of people who have important places to be. This is the priority line. Priority. Does that word mean anything to you? The gate agent intervened. "Ma'am, it will just be a moment." "It's already been more than a moment," Lucy snapped, her voice rising in pitch and volume. She stepped forward, crowding the man. "Frankly, I'm surprised they're letting people like you in first class at all. Did you get lost on your way to coach?" The man flinched as if struck. A hush fell over the boarding area. Phones were discreetly raised. The insult, thick with undisguised racism, hung in the air like poison. The man looked at her, his expression no longer apologetic, but filled with a deep, profound disappointment. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't return the insult. He simply said, "Ma'am, there is no need for that kind of talk. We are all just trying to get to where we're going." "Well, some of us are trying to get there faster," she retorted, her face a mask of contempt. Finally, the gate agent, flustered, took the man's phone and scanned it manually. "You're all set, Mr. Thorne. Seat 2A. Enjoy your flight." Marcus Thorne gave the agent a weak but grateful nod. He cast one last, lingering look at Lucy, a look not of anger, but of sorrow, before he turned and walked down the jet bridge, his shoulders a little less straight than they had been a few minutes before. Lucy, triumphant, scanned her own ticket with a flourish and marched past the agent without a word. As she settled into her plush leather seat 1B, she took a sip of the pre-departure champagne the flight attendant offered. She felt a surge of satisfaction. She had restored order. The obstacle had been removed. She dismissed the man from her mind completely, turning her focus back to the prize, the meeting in San Francisco. She had no idea that the quiet, dignified man she had just verbally assaulted, Marcus Thorne, was not just an obstacle. He was the father of her new universe. The 6-hour flight was, for Lucy, a productive cocoon. She fine-tuned her presentation, a data-driven masterpiece outlining a bold, aggressive marketing strategy for the next fiscal year. It was brilliant. She knew it. It was the kind of work that got you a corner office with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge. She didn't spare another thought for the man in seat 2A, who sat quietly by the window, reading his book for the entire flight. When they landed, she was the first one off the plane, her carry-on in tow, a shark cutting through the water. The next morning, she arrived at the Innovate Corp Global Headquarters, a breathtaking structure of glass and steel that loomed over Soma. The lobby was a cathedral of modern capitalism, with a soaring atrium and a living wall of exotic plants that was misted automatically every hour. This was her temple, and she was a high priestess. Her confidence, however, was immediately pricked by the sight of Gregory Finch holding court by the espresso bar. Gregory, the SVP of product development, was her chief rival. He was slick, politically savvy, and had a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Lucy," he greeted her, his voice oozing false charm. "Surprised to see you made it. I heard there was some commotion at JFK yesterday." Lucy's blood ran cold. "Just the usual airport chaos. Nothing worth mentioning." "Oh, I don't know," Gregory said, taking a deliberate sip of his macchiato. "A video of a woman who looks remarkably like you berating an elderly gentleman is making the rounds on a few of the internal company Slack channels. The gossip channel is having a field day." Panic, an emotion Lucy despised, flickered in her chest. She kept her expression a neutral mask. "I have no idea what you're talking about. People have too much time on their hands." "Of course," Gregory said, his smile widening. "Well, let's hope the new CEO isn't on Slack. With this new push for empathy and inclusion in corporate culture, that kind of footage could be problematic." He patted her arm condescendingly. "See you in the boardroom. Don't be late." He walked away, leaving Lucy rooted to the spot. Her mind raced. A video? How bad was it? She had been so consumed by her own self-righteousness that she hadn't noticed the phones. She felt a tremor of genuine fear. This could damage her. This could ruin everything. She straightened her blazer, forcing the fear down. Gregory was just trying to rattle her. No one of importance would see a stupid gossip video. The new CEO, Arya Thorne, would be focused on financials, on strategy, on the bottom line. She wouldn't have time for petty airport squabbles. She just had to nail this presentation. Meanwhile, across the bay in a quiet, sunlit home in Berkeley, Marcus Thorne was drinking coffee with his daughter. Arya Thorne was the antithesis of Lucy Gabriel. Where Lucy was sharp angles and cold calculation, Arya was warm, with a thoughtful gaze and an easy laugh that she used often. At 36, she had already orchestrated two of the most successful tech turnarounds of the decade, earning her a reputation as a visionary leader who prized people as much as profits. "So how was the flight, Dad?" Arya asked, sliding a plate of toast across the table. Marcus hesitated, the memory of the airport casting a shadow over his cheerful morning. "The flight itself was lovely. The boarding, not so much." "What happened?" Arya's attention sharpened. She knew her father's tendency to downplay unpleasantness. Slowly, Marcus recounted the incident. He didn't use inflammatory language, simply stated the facts. The woman's impatience, her cutting remarks, the final ugly insult that had made his stomach clench. "It was the look on her face, Ari," he said softly. "Such contempt. As if my very presence was an inconvenience she shouldn't have to bear. I haven't felt that in a long time." Arya's hands had tightened into fists on her lap. Her father was the kindest, most gentle man she knew. A retired history professor who had spent 40 years inspiring students, who volunteered at the local library, who believed in the inherent goodness of people. The thought of someone treating him with such cruelty filled her with a cold, protective rage. "Did you get her name, Dad?" Her voice was quiet, dangerously so. "No, of course not. What for? I just want to forget it. I'm here to celebrate with you, my brilliant new CEO," he said, his pride in her shining through his hurt. "Let's not let one unhappy woman spoil this." Arya forced a smile, but inside her mind was whirring. An impeccably dressed blonde woman, mid to late 40s, flying first class on yesterday's JFK to SFO flight. It was a long shot, but she had a suspicion. She pulled out her phone and sent a discreet text to her new executive assistant. "Can you pull the first-class passenger manifest for yesterday's 4 p.m. flight from JFK? Also, I need to see everything currently trending on our internal social channels. Everything." She put her phone away and turned back to her father, her expression softening. "You're right, Dad. Let's not. Tell me about the book you were reading." As he began to speak, her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant popped up on the screen. It was a link to a video file, grainy but unmistakable, and below it, a name from the flight manifest. Lucy Gabriel, Seat 1B, SVP of Marketing. Arya felt no satisfaction, only a hardening resolve. The woman who had hurt her father was one of her own senior executives. And in 2 hours, that woman was scheduled to present her vision for the future of the company. A future that Arya was now in complete control of. The universe, it seemed, had a flair for dramatic irony. The main boardroom at Innovate Corp was on the 50th floor, a glass-walled chamber that felt suspended in the sky. The panoramic view of the San Francisco Bay was a display of power, a declaration that the people in this room shaped the world. Lucy sat at the long, obsidian table, her laptop open, her presentation queued up. She had managed to push Gregory's words and the thread of the video to the back of her mind. Here in this room, she was in her element. Data, strategy, and ambition were her armor. The other senior executives filed in, a collection of sharp suits and sharper minds. There was David Chen, the stoic CFO, Maria Flores, the brilliant and perpetually exhausted head of engineering, and of course, Gregory Finch, who gave Lucy a shark-like grin as he took the seat directly opposite her. The air crackled with anticipation and a healthy dose of anxiety. They were all about to meet their new queen. At precisely 9 a.m., the double doors at the head of the room swung open. The chairman of the board, a stately man named Richard Davenport, walked in. He was followed by a woman Lucy had never seen before. Arya Thorne was not what she had expected. She was younger than the rumors suggested, and she carried herself with a quiet confidence that was more potent than any overt display of power. She was dressed in a simple, elegant navy blue dress, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her eyes, intelligent and perceptive, swept across the room, taking the measure of her new team. "Good morning, everyone," Richard began. "It is my distinct honor and pleasure to formally introduce you to the new president and chief executive officer of Innovate Corp, Arya Thorne." A polite, if strained, round of applause filled the room. Lucy clapped along, her mind racing. "She's impressive, poised. I need to be at the top of my game." Arya stepped forward. "Thank you, Richard, and thank you all for being here. I've spent the past few weeks poring over the data, the reports, and the personnel files. I'm incredibly impressed by the talent in this room. I'm not here to tear down what Michael Sterling built. I'm here to build upon it, to make us faster, smarter, and a more responsible corporate citizen in the 21st century." Her voice was calm, measured, and commanded attention. She spoke for a few minutes about her vision, using words like synergy, innovation, and sustainability. But then she shifted gears. "But a company is not just its products or its profit margins," she said, her tone becoming more personal. "It's its people, and the culture we foster is the soil from which everything else grows. I believe in a culture of respect, absolute, unequivocal respect, from the C-suite to the mailroom, how we treat each other, And how we treat people outside these walls is a direct reflection of our brand. It's not just a PR statement, it's our core identity. As she spoke, her eyes continued to scan the faces around the table. Lucy felt a strange prickle of unease. There was an intensity in the new CEO's gaze that was unsettling. Then Arya's eyes stopped. They landed on Lucy. For a split second, there was no recognition. Arya saw the SVP of marketing, a key player she needed to assess. But then something clicked. A flicker of memory. A face from a grainy cell phone video. The face her father had described. The contemptuous sneer. The cold, cruel eyes. Arya's expression didn't change, but a glacial stillness settled over her. Her voice remained even, but the warmth vanished, replaced by a professional chill that was far more terrifying than any outburst of anger could be. Lucy saw the shift. She saw the moment of recognition in Arya Thorne's eyes, and her world tilted on its axis. The blood drained from her face. Her perfectly ordered mind dissolved into a maelstrom of white-hot panic. It can't be. It's not possible. The man at the airport. His name. The gate agent had said it. Mr. Thorne. Arya Thorne. Marcus Thorne. The pieces slammed together with the force of a physical blow. The quiet, elderly man she had berated. The man she had told to fly in cargo. The man she had sneered at for his race and his age. Was the father of her new boss. The woman who now held Lucy's entire career in the palm of her hand. Lucy felt the air leave her lungs. The panoramic view of the bay seemed to blur and warp. Gregory Finch, sensing a shift in the room's dynamics, watched her with narrowed, curious eyes. Arya broke the silent, electrifying gaze and smoothly continued as if nothing had happened. Our agenda today is to go over the Q4 projections. We'll start with marketing. Lucy, I believe you have a presentation for us. She gestured toward the screen at the front of the room. It was a simple, professional gesture. But to Lucy, it felt like a queen pointing her subject towards the gallows. Her hands were trembling. Her mouth was dry. The brilliant, data-driven masterpiece she had spent hours perfecting now felt like a eulogy for her own career. She stood up on unsteady legs, the eyes of everyone in the room on her, but the only eyes she could see were the cold, calculating ones of Arya Thorne. Lucy somehow managed to get through her presentation. Her voice, usually so commanding, was a thready imitation of its normal self. The numbers and strategies that had seemed so brilliant on the plane now sounded hollow and rehearsed. She fumbled with the remote, skipped a slide by accident, and used the word synergize 3 times in one sentence. It was a train wreck in slow motion. Gregory Finch watched with undisguised glee. When she finished, a painful silence hung in the air. "Thank you, Lucy," Arya said, her tone flat and unreadable. Ambitious plan. We'll circle back to it." She immediately pivoted. "David, let's see the CFO's report." For the next 2 hours, Lucy sat in a state of suspended terror. She was a ghost at the table, invisible. Arya never looked at her again, directing all questions and comments to other executives. It was a masterful display of passive annihilation. She wasn't firing Lucy. She was erasing her. Just as the meeting was about to adjourn, Arya looked at her executive assistant. "Brenda, please ask Ms. Gabrielle to remain. I'd like a word with her." The other executives filed out, some casting pitying glances, others, like Gregory, barely concealing their schadenfreude. Soon it was just the two of them in the vast, silent boardroom. 2 women at opposite ends of the long obsidian table, the city of San Francisco sprawling beneath them like a conquered territory. Lucy's heart hammered against her ribs. She gripped her hands together in her lap to stop them from shaking. This was it. The axe was about to fall. Arya stood up and walked slowly to the floor-to-ceiling window, her back to Lucy. "My father is a retired history professor," she began, her voice conversational, almost gentle. "He taught for 40 years at Columbia. His specialty was the American Civil Rights Movement. He believes that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." Lucy said nothing. There was nothing to say. "He's a kind man," Arya continued, still looking out the window. "He finds joy in small things, old books, a well-tended garden, a good cup of coffee. He raised me on his own after my mother passed. He taught me that a person's worth is not measured by their title or their bank account, but by their character, by how they treat people who can do nothing for them. She turned around, her eyes finally locking with Lucy's. The mask of the CEO was gone. This was the look of a daughter, a fiercely protective daughter. "So you can imagine my concern," Arya said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "When a valued family member, an elderly man traveling to see his daughter, is verbally assaulted in public, when he is subjected to cruel, classist, and racist remarks by a person who believes herself to be superior." Lucy flinched. The words, spoken so calmly, were like daggers. "Ms. Thorne, Arya, I had no idea. It was a stressful travel day. I was out of line. I am so sorry. If I could take it back." Her apology sounded pathetic and self-serving, even to her own ears. "You're not sorry for what you did, Lucy," Arya corrected her, taking a step closer to the table. "You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry that the man you decided to belittle happens to be my father. If he had been a stranger, you would have forgotten his face before your plane reached cruising altitude. Am I wrong?" Lucy couldn't answer. She just stared at her hands, her carefully constructed world shattered. "I read your file," Arya said, her tone shifting back to the cool, professional CEO. "It's impressive. You're driven, you're intelligent, you deliver results. But there's a recurring theme in your 360-degree reviews. Subordinates find you demanding, unapproachable, lacking in empathy. You have the highest turnover rate of any department head in this company. You see people as assets to be managed, not as human beings to be led." Arya walked around the table until she was standing directly behind Lucy's chair. Lucy felt a chill run down her spine. "Firing you would be easy," Arya murmured, her voice close to Lucy's ear. "And believe me, every fiber of my being wants to. It would be just. But my father also taught me about a different kind of justice. Sometimes it's about education. Sometimes it's about forcing someone to look in the mirror." Lucy dared to feel a flicker of hope. "A second chance?" Arya walked back to the head of the table. "Your marketing proposal is rejected. It's built on an old model of aggressive, soulless capitalism. Innovate Corp is moving in a new direction. A more human direction." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Effective immediately, you are being reassigned. David Chen will take over marketing in the interim. Your new role is senior lead on a new corporate initiative." Lucy looked up, confused. "What initiative?" Arya gave a small, cold smile. "I'm creating a new division, the Community and Social Responsibility Task Force. Your first project will be to establish a 5-year outreach and partnership program. You'll be working with nonprofits and community leaders in underserved, low-income neighborhoods here in the Bay Area. You'll be spending your time not in boardrooms, but in community centers, church basements, and homeless shelters. You will be the face of Innovate Corp's new commitment to empathy." The implication was a slap in the face. It wasn't a promotion, it was a punishment. A re-education camp disguised as a corporate initiative. She was being sent into exile, tasked with a project she had no experience with and even less interest in. A project designed to make her confront the very people she held in such disdain. "You'll be given a small budget and a cubicle on the 3rd floor, Arya concluded, her voice devoid of any emotion. "Your performance will be reviewed quarterly. By me. Do you have any questions?" Lucy stared at her, dumbfounded. It was a brilliant, cruel, and perfectly legal form of revenge. Arya wasn't just firing her, she was orchestrating her slow, humiliating demise. Quitting would mean admitting defeat and losing her massive severance package. Staying meant enduring this bespoke hell Arya had created just for her. "No," Lucy whispered. "No questions." "Good," Arya said, turning to leave. At the door, she stopped and looked back. "Oh, and Lucy, my father flies back to New York next week. From SFO, first class. I trust his boarding experience will be considerate." The door clicked shut, leaving Lucy alone in the silent, opulent room, the gilded cage where her career had just come to die. The cubicle on the 3rd floor was everything the 50th floor office was not. It was cramped, beige, and lit by humming fluorescent lights. Instead of a panoramic view of the bay, Lucy's new vista was a concrete support pillar. Her new title, Senior Lead, was a meaningless platitude. She had no team, no assistant, and a budget that was barely enough to cover printing costs. The first week was a study in humiliation. Colleagues who used to vie for her attention now avoided her gaze in the hallway. Whispers followed her into the break room. Gregory Finch once sauntered by her cubicle, a smug look on his face, and remarked, "Quite the change of scenery, Lucy. Very egalitarian." Her new assignment was a nightmare. She was tasked with connecting with community leaders in neighborhoods like Bayview Hunters Point in East Oakland. These were proud, tight-knit communities, wary of corporate saviors swooping in with clipboards and empty promises. Lucy, with her designer suits and condescending demeanor, was received with a mixture of suspicion and outright hostility. Her first meeting was with a woman named Sister Alice, a formidable, no-nonsense nun who ran a soup kitchen and a shelter. Lucy, attempting to speak their language, used corporate jargon. "We're looking to synergize our core competencies with grassroots initiatives to maximize community impact," she said, reading from a script. Sister Alice stared at her over the rim of her glasses. "Honey, I have 87 hungry people to feed in the next hour. I don't need synergy. I need a new industrial-grade freezer and a reliable source of fresh produce. Can you give me that?" Lucy was flummoxed. "Well, that would require a budget proposal and a review of our philanthropic allocation model. So the answer is no," Sister Alice said, turning away. "Don't waste my time with corporate poetry." It was one failure after another. A community organizer in Oakland laughed in her face when she suggested a thought leader symposium. The director of a youth center told her she wouldn't let her vulture capitalism anywhere near his kids. They could smell her inauthenticity. They saw the project for what it was, a PR stunt run by a woman who looked at them with the same thinly veiled contempt she'd shown Marcus Thorne at the airport. At home, her life was also fraying. Her husband, Robert, a man who had married her for her ambition as much as for her looks, was appalled. A cubicle? A community outreach project? "Lucy, this is a career death sentence. People are talking at the country club. They're saying you've been put out to pasture." "It's a temporary reassignment," she lied, the words tasting like ash. "Make it temporary then," he said coldly. "Fix it, or this new humble look isn't going to be very becoming on you." Desperate, Lucy tried to play the game. She swapped her Gucci suits for more approachable J. Crew outfits. She forced smiles. She read books on community engagement. But her heart wasn't in it. It was a role she was playing, and she was a terrible actress. Her quarterly review with Aria Thorne was brutal. Aria didn't raise her voice. She simply presented the facts. 0 partnerships established. $0 of the budget allocated effectively. Feedback from every single community leader you've met with has been universally negative. They've used words like condescending, disingenuous, and insulting. Aria slid a folder across the desk. Sister Alice was particularly descriptive. She said you have the soul of a spreadsheet. Lucy sat in silence, the humiliation of physical weight pressing down on her. "This isn't working, Lucy," Aria said, her voice clinical. "I gave you an opportunity to learn something. About this company's new direction, about the world outside your bubble, perhaps even about yourself. But you haven't learned a thing. You're just waiting for your punishment to be over so you can go back to being the person you were before." Aria leaned forward. "Let me be clear. There is no going back. The person you were before no longer has a place at this company." A new kind of fear settled into Lucy's bones. This wasn't just about her career anymore. Aria wasn't just trying to teach her a lesson. She was building a case, a meticulously documented case of incompetence. The failed project, the negative feedback, the wasted resources, it was all ammunition. Aria was giving her enough rope, and Lucy was fashioning the noose with her own 2 hands. The slow, humiliating demise was entering its final act. The breaking point was orchestrated within the glittering opulence of the Fairmont Hotel's grand ballroom. It was the annual Innovate Corp Night of Giving, a high-profile gala that served as both a charity fundraiser and a corporate peacock display. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the murmur of 1,000 conversations about stock options and IPOs. For Lucy, it was a familiar battleground. But tonight she was not a commander. She was a glorified chaperone, and she despised every second of it. Her weapon of choice, a stunning silver Carolina Herrera gown, felt like a costume for a part she no longer played. Arya had given her a single critical task: act as the official liaison for the community partners being honored. This group of 20 individuals, nonprofit directors, shelter managers, and local activists, were the supposed heart of the event, the tangible proof of Innovate's philanthropy. To Lucy, they were a millstone around her neck, a physical manifestation of her fall from grace. Her resentment curdled into overt disdain from the moment they arrived. She greeted them not with a welcoming smile, but with the brisk efficiency of a tour guide rushing a group through a museum. "Welcome to the event," she said, her voice clipped. "Your designated area is over by the silent auction tables. Please try to remain in this section, as the main floor is reserved for our corporate sponsors and major donors. You will each be provided with one complimentary drink ticket." The insult, so casually delivered, landed with precision. One drink ticket. The implication was clear. You are guests, but you are not our equals. Know your place. Sister Alice, ever pragmatic, simply raised an eyebrow. But a younger man, David Henderson, who ran an after-school coding program in East Oakland, couldn't hide his dismay. "One ticket? Ma'am, we're your honored guests." Lucy gave him a withering look. "And we are honored to have you. However, the bar is a significant expense, and our priority is maximizing the donation total." She turned away before he could respond, her mission complete. She had established the hierarchy. She watched them huddle together, looking uncomfortable and out of place in their Sunday-best suits and dresses amidst the sea of couture and custom tuxedos. They should be grateful they were invited at all, she thought, a bitter justification forming in her mind. Her gaze drifted across the ballroom, and then it happened. She saw him. Marcus Thorne. He was standing near the main stage, deep in conversation with Arya and Richard Davenport, the chairman of the board. He was wearing a classic, impeccably tailored tuxedo and looked utterly at ease, his gentle smile radiating a quiet confidence that drew people in. He wasn't a guest, he was a focal point. As Lucy watched, a tech billionaire she recognized from the cover of Wired approached Marcus, shaking his hand with genuine deference. The sight filled Lucy with a venomous rage. It was all because of him. This gentle, smiling man was the author of her ruin. In her warped perspective, he wasn't the victim of her tirade. He was the cause of her current humiliation. Her bitterness solidified into a hard, cold resolve. She would endure this night, this project, and she would find a way to claw her way back. She would show them all. This decision made her careless. She abandoned her post by the auction tables and began to circulate, desperate to reconnect with former colleagues, to remind them she still existed. This left her charges unattended and isolated. It also left them accessible. Ben Carter, a young and ambitious reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle, was on the hunt for a story. His editor had sent him to write a standard puff piece about corporate generosity, but his journalistic instincts craved something with more substance. He found it when he approached Sister Alice, hoping for a feel-good quote. "It's a wonderful event," Sister Alice said, her tone carefully neutral, "and a very generous donation to be sure, though the experience has been a bit bewildering." Ben's senses tingled. Bewildering? How so? "Well, our corporate liaison," Sister Alice scanned the crowd, "a Ms. Gabriel. She brought us in and instructed us not to bother the important guests. After handing us our single drink ticket, she disappeared. To be honest, I felt more welcome when I had to get a glass of water from a busboy station a few minutes ago." Ben's internal alarm bells went off. This was it. This was the real story. He discreetly turned on the voice recorder on his phone. He moved on to David Henderson, who was trying to look at the silent auction items, but was being subtly ignored by the staff. "Your program is one of the beneficiaries tonight, correct?" Ben asked. "Yes, and we're profoundly grateful," David said. "But the woman who was supposed to be our host, she referred to us as the charity cases when she was speaking to one of the event staff. I heard her. It makes you feel like a prop in their PR campaign, you know?" Ben had everything he needed. Excusing himself, he found a quiet corner and began to type furiously on his phone. He wove the quotes together, painting a damning picture of elitism and disrespect. He remembered the name Gabriel from a Slack channel leak months ago and, with a quick search, found the old grainy video from the JFK airport gate. He embedded the link in the article. It was no longer a story about one rude employee. It was a devastating narrative of a pattern of behavior, a perfect example of corporate hypocrisy. He hit publish. The story went live at 8:15 p.m. The effect was like a digital virus released into the room. First, a few phones buzzed, then a few more. A murmur started near the bar and spread through the crowd. Heads began to turn, first towards the huddled group of community partners, then towards Lucy, who was in a futile conversation with a marketing director who was suddenly very eager to get away. The atmosphere in the ballroom shifted from celebratory to scandalized in less than 10 minutes. Gregory Finch found her by the terrace doors. He held up his phone, the headline glowing on the screen. Innovate Corp's Night of Giving, marred by elitism, community heroes treated as charity cases by executive. "Looks like your 15 minutes of fame just got a sequel, Lucy," he said, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Impressive work. You've managed to become a liability in 2 different departments. That might be a company record." He walked away, leaving her to stare in horror at her own indictment. Across the room, Arya Thorne's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her pleasant expression freezing for a fraction of a second. She read the headline, her eyes scanning the first few paragraphs. A glacial calm settled over her features. She excused herself from her conversation, walked over to Richard Davenport and showed him the phone. He read it, his face darkening. They exchanged a brief, silent nod of understanding. The decision had been made. The next morning, Lucy was summoned not to Arya's office on the 50th floor, but to a sterile, windowless conference room in the Human Resources Department on the 2nd floor. Arya was there, flanked by the head of HR and a stern-faced corporate lawyer. The air was cold and clinical. "Lucy Gabrielle," the HR director began, reading from a prepared statement, "your actions at last night's event have caused significant and immediate reputational damage to this company. Your behavior was in direct violation of multiple articles in our corporate code of conduct, specifically those pertaining to public representation and professional respect." "This is a joke," Lucy stammered, her voice trembling. She looked directly at Arya. "This is what you wanted. You put me in a role you knew I wasn't suited for. You set me up to fail." Arya's expression was unyielding, as if carved from marble. "On the contrary," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "I put you in a position to demonstrate a single ounce of growth. I gave you an assignment that required the most basic level of human decency. You have access to the company's full diversity and sensitivity training resources. You were given a clear mandate. Instead of learning, you chose to mock the very people this company purports to help. You didn't just fail, Lucy. You chose to fail, publicly and spectacularly." The lawyer slid a thick termination agreement across the table. "This, combined with the extensively documented performance failures in your quarterly reviews, leaves us with no alternative. We are terminating your employment, effective immediately." "You can't," Lucy whispered, tears of pure rage and helplessness finally spilling over. "I have given 20 years to this company. And in one afternoon at an airport and one evening at a gala, you have undone millions of dollars in brand equity," Arya retorted, her voice like chipping ice. "It was a poor return on our investment. Security will escort you to your former cubicle to collect your personal belongings. You have 15 minutes. Stunned and shaking, Lucy was led out of the room. As she stood in the hallway, the world a nauseating blur, her personal cell phone rang. It was her husband, Robert. She answered, hoping for a sliver of support. There was none. "I just got off the phone with Bill Henderson from the club." Robert's voice was a furious hiss. "The Chronicle article is everywhere. Our picture from last year's gala is in it. The board has called an emergency ethics meeting to review our membership." "Our membership, Lucy, all our friends, our entire social circle, it's all going up in smoke because you couldn't control your disgusting snobbery. Don't bother coming home tonight. Have your lawyer call mine." The line went dead. In the span of 12 hours, she had lost her job, her reputation, her social standing, and her marriage. The karma wasn't a gentle lesson. It was a swift, brutal, systematic demolition of her entire existence. As the security guard gestured impatiently down the hall, Lucy realized Arya hadn't just built a case against her. She had simply stood back and allowed Lucy to build her own gallows, and then watched as she kicked the stool out from under herself. 6 months after the catastrophic Night of Giving, the world had irrevocably rearranged itself. The ripples from that evening had not faded. They had become defining currents for all involved. At Innovate Corp, the scandal became a legendary case study in corporate crisis management, with Arya Thorne as its celebrated architect. The day after the story broke, she didn't hide behind a press release. She held a live company-wide town hall, which was also streamed to the public. Standing alone on a stage without notes, she was a portrait of accountable leadership. "Last night we failed," she began, her voice resonating with sincerity. "We failed our community partners, and in doing so, we failed ourselves. We allowed a culture of elitism and disrespect to fester in the dark corners of our company, and it manifested in an act of public humiliation. For this, I offer no excuses, only my deepest and most profound apology." She didn't stop there. She announced the immediate formation of a new permanent community advisory board. This wasn't a PR stunt, it was a structural change. The board members, including a once skeptical Sister Alice and a deeply impressed David Henderson, were given real power, a significant budget, and paid stipends for their expertise. They were no longer beneficiaries, they were partners. The initiative Lucy had been tasked with sabotaging was now Innovate's flagship program, a symbol of its renewed soul. The market responded with overwhelming approval. After a brief dip, Innovate's stock climbed to an all-time high, buoyed by a wave of positive press that praised the company's radical accountability. Arya Thorne graced the cover of Forbes, the headline reading, "The Empathy CEO, How Arya Thorne Turned a Scandal into a Triumph." Across the bay in his sun-drenched garden in Berkeley, Marcus Thorne clipped a stray rose bush. He had seen the magazine cover, a copy of which sat proudly on his coffee table. He and Arya spoke several times a week, their conversations filled with her excitement about new projects and his gentle advice, often disguised as historical anecdotes. He never once asked about Lucy Gabriel. He didn't need the details of her fate to know that the scales of justice had been balanced. He saw the proof in his daughter's confident leadership and the genuine good she was putting into the world. He believed that character, like a garden, required diligent weeding. You had to remove the toxic, invasive elements to allow the good things to grow. He trusted with a father's complete faith that his daughter had been a thorough gardener. For Lucy Gabriel, the 6 months had not been a period of renewal, but a slow, grinding erosion of everything she had ever been. The unraveling was cruelly efficient. The divorce was swift and brutal. Robert's lawyers argued that the public disgrace constituted a breach of the marital social contract, and a terrified Lucy, unable to afford a protracted legal battle, agreed to a settlement that left her with a fraction of their shared wealth. The minimalist masterpiece in Connecticut, once her fortress of order, became a hollow cavern of memories. The day the for sale sign was hammered into the manicured lawn, she felt a profound sense of dislocation, as if her own ghost was being evicted. Her professional life was a wasteland. Initially blinded by a lifetime of privilege, she believed she could bounce back. She applied for SVP roles at competing firms, her resume still glittering with 20 years of accomplishments. The rejections were swift and silent. She aimed lower for director-level positions, then manager roles. The response was always the same, a polite, automated email, or worse, no response at all. One sympathetic headhunter finally told her the unvarnished truth over the phone. "Lucy, I have to be honest with you," the woman said. "Your name is toxic. When a potential employer Googles you, the first 4 results are the Chronicle article, the original JFK video, a national news piece on corporate accountability that uses you as the primary case study, and a dozen think pieces on entitlement in the workplace. You're not just a candidate with a bad reference, you're a meme, a cautionary tale. No publicly traded company will touch you." The truth was a physical blow. Her identity, once forged in the fires of the boardroom, was now defined by her worst moments. immortalized online for the world to see. Her savings dwindled with terrifying speed. The Connecticut house sold, but after the divorce settlement and taxes, the remainder wasn't enough to sustain her lifestyle. She was forced to abandon her old life entirely, fleeing the whispers and judgmental stares of her former social circle. She found a small one-bedroom apartment in a noisy walk-up building in Queens, a place where no one knew her name. The sleek, silent glide of her Mercedes was replaced by the screech and rumble of the 7 train. The scent of fresh orchids in her foyer was replaced by the smell of her neighbors cooking in the hallway. Humiliation became her constant companion, but survival was a more pressing need. After months of rejections, she took the only job she was offered. It was a position that required no resume, no background check, and no Google search. A server at the Skyway Diner, a bustling 24-hour establishment on a service road near LaGuardia Airport. The polyester uniform was coarse against her skin. The non-slip shoes made her feet ache with a deep, grinding pain she'd never known. Her first few weeks were a blur of mistakes and corrections. She spilled coffee on a pilot, forgot to put in an order for a family of 5, and was sharply reprimanded by the diner manager, a gruff man half her age, for her sullen demeanor. "Smile, sweetheart," he'd barked. "It's part of the job." She learned to smile. She learned to balance 3 plates on one arm. She learned to call truck drivers Han and to remember who took their coffee black. She was no longer managing multi-million-dollar budgets. She was managing 10 tables in the lunch rush. It was a raw, exhausting, and deeply humbling existence. Every day was a forced confrontation with the kinds of people she had once considered invisible, the very people she had believed were obstacles in her important life. The final karmic seal was set on a rainy Tuesday in late autumn. The diner was packed, a steamy refuge from the miserable weather outside. Lucy was moving on autopilot, her mind a dull hum of orders and table numbers. A group of 4 flight attendants took a booth in her section, laughing and shedding their raincoats. Lucy approached, her order pad in hand. "Hi, welcome to the Skyway. Can I start you folks off with some coffee?" she recited, her voice flat. One of the attendants, a woman with sharp, observant eyes, looked up and squinted. "Excuse me," she said slowly. "You look really familiar. Do I know you from somewhere?" Lucy's blood ran cold. "I don't think so," she said quickly, keeping her eyes down. "I have one of those faces." "No, I really think I do," the woman persisted, pulling out her phone. Her friends watched, curious. "You used to fly a lot, right? First class?" Lucy felt a tremor in her hand. That was a long time ago." The flight attendant's face suddenly lit up with the cruel joy of discovery. "Oh my God, I know who you are," she exclaimed, loud enough for the neighboring booths to hear. "You're the woman from that video, the one at JFK who went absolutely ballistic on that poor old man. People like you shouldn't be in first class," she mimicked in a shrill, mocking voice. Her friends gasped, their eyes wide with recognition. The flight attendant turned her phone around, showing them the grainy video that had destroyed Lucy's life. "See? It's her. Wow. What a fall from grace, huh?" Time seemed to stop. The clatter of cutlery, the sizzle of the grill, the low hum of conversation. It all faded away. All Lucy could hear was the blood pounding in her ears. The faces at the table were no longer curious. They were openly judgmental, staring at her as if she were an exhibit in a zoo. She wasn't Lucy Gabriel, a human being. She was a spectacle, a story, a meme who had just served them coffee. She didn't say a word. She couldn't. She simply turned around, placed her order pad on the counter, and walked numbly towards the kitchen doors. The arc of the moral universe, she finally, crushingly understood, wasn't just a philosophical concept. It was a gravitational force, and for her it had bent all the way down, pinning her to the greasy linoleum floor of a diner, where she would be forever remembered not for who she was, but for the one time she had revealed her soul. This stunning story serves as a powerful reminder that the world is smaller than we think, and our actions, especially those born from hatred and prejudice, have consequences that can ripple out in ways we could never predict. Lucy Gabriel believed her status put her above common decency, but she learned the hard way that true power lies not in a title or a bank account, but in character and respect. The quiet dignity of Marcus Thorne and the decisive action of his daughter Arya show us that karma isn't just a mystical force. Sometimes it's delivered with cold, hard, professional precision. If you believe that what goes around truly comes around, and if this story of justice and consequence resonated with you, please hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you won't miss another incredible real-life story of karma in action. What did you think of Arya's response? Let us know in the comments below.